Super. Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Portland, Maine Board of Education Finance Operations and Personnel Committee meeting on May 13th, 2024. It's 4:32 and we are just getting started. Let's see. So my name is Sarah Bryden. I'm the chair of the committee. I also have with me, we also have here committee members, Board Member Opperman and Board Member Figdor. And if anybody else from the board is able to join, then we will welcome them as they join. We have with us Superintendent Scanlon. Oh, we have Board Chair Lentz here with us. We have from staff, we have Helene DeBartolomeo, Sarah Warren, Barrett Wilkinson, and I think I've gotten all the squares. Super. Okay. It's a manageable group today. So all right, so I am going to check the attendee list, see if we have any hands up for public comment. If we do have anybody who'd like to give public comment, I'll go through the rules and things to keep in mind around that. So I will just give it a minute and see if anybody chooses to raise a hand in Zoom indicating they would like to give public comment. I am not seeing anybody, so I'm going to close public comment. And we are going to have a really, really exciting, fun conversation today in our committee. So we're going to get an update on fiscal year 24, which is our current year, year-to-date information. We're going to get some information on fiscal year 25, which is next year, the timeline around that process. MainePers, ADP, major construction, lots of big topics. And so I am going to turn the floor over to Superintendent Scanlon to walk us through those topics.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you, everybody. Dr. Warren, are you able to do slides for us this evening? While she's pulling that up, just to give a little bit of context, we're going to share an update that is primarily about FY25 and where we are at. The FY24 and the MainePers is primarily about where we are with our transition to the new payroll system and how that is impacting both our reporting around FY24 as well as MainePers. And then we'll share an update around major construction as it impacts our conversation that we've had over the last couple of weeks, but has really been going on for the last several years around high school of the future, as major construction is one of the milestones that comes up as we just think about keeping our spot in the line and our options available for that work. And so that has a deadline that's coming up here in August. And so we just want to share with this committee, as part of its oversight is facilities, where we are at on that. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Helene, who will share an update on just where we're at with FY24. And just want to put in context, as Helene shares that update, is that, you know, one of the things that the finance team, many of the things that the finance team has taken on this year, a finance team would try to do one of those things in a year. And so as we have been launching ADP and the new payroll, it has pushed us to do a number of these pieces all in one year. And one of those is thinking about how do we reconcile and how do we pull the data from ADP into our general ledger, our accounting system, so that we're able to track how we're doing year to date. And that has required us working hand in hand with ADP around the build of specific reports. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Helene, and then I will give a quick update on City Council, and then Helene will jump back in around FY25. So Sarah, if you want to go to the next slide.
Good evening. So we're making progress on converting ADP payroll to our financial system, but this is preventing us on giving you a year-to-date reporting. So currently, our FY24 financials are still missing payroll data for January 24 to current. But as we are currently working on that, staff currently is working on managing to upload ADP into the system currently right now. So far, we did manage to get one payroll, manual payroll into the system. We've done that successfully. So with that, we're working backwards. And so we're working with the most current information and then working towards the older data. So as it states here, after we were running it, we were able to determine that what happened and what prevented us to just go all in right away was there was a difference between site locations that we applied in ADP versus what was happening in our Munis data. And so we had to do a stop in between two payroll systems, and we had to do a rebuild in ADP of our site locations because the original build in ADP, we created, for some reason, this was prior to me coming on board, the ADP system was originally built with different site numbers. And so we were realizing that was creating a huge hindrance on the crosswalk going from ADP payroll into our Munis financials. So that created a slowdown, but we did the rebuild and we're back on track to getting ADP now into our Munis financials. So also the other item that created a slight delay is that one of the items that we have is that some of the financial data, what we do in ADP is not necessarily the one-to-one crosswalk into Munis Financial. So that's something that we're working on creating a crosswalk for. So as we build this crosswalk, as you can see, as we build it, it will have to be added for grants and updated as we add grants and delete information into the system. So overall, this will cause a delay in the process for bank reconciliations for the city, and the city is aware of that. We did have a conversation with the city today and did advise them that we are working on getting those journal entries in now, and they asked us to start making them effective in the month of April so that we would not interfere with the activity that they have done to date. So they asked us to start making those journal entries effective of April, but they are aware that we're starting to enter that information now. And so we are planning to have all of this information in by the end of this month and hoping to have everything reconciled by the end of June in preparation for our audit coming for the end of the fiscal year.
Sarah, if you can go back. Chair, if it's all right with you, I think because we're going topic by topic, it would be helpful to maybe pause and see if there's any questions on this.
I was just going to ask if now would be an appropriate time for questions. So yes, I agree. I will look to board members to raise their hands if they have a question. And while I'm waiting for that, I do have a couple of quick questions. So my first question is if you could just spend a couple of sentences explaining, both for us on the committee and us on the board and also for the community, Munis finance. And the reason why I ask that is there's been a lot of discussion historically about moving from Munis to ADP, and it sounds like potentially ADP replaced part of what Munis used to do for us, and we are still using Munis. So if you know, some explanation of how Munis finance currently functions, that'd be super.
Sure. So we were, as a finance department, we worked in two different systems. We used Munis as a payroll system, and we used Munis as a finance system. We used Munis as a payroll system, and that's the system we got out of and replaced with ADP. But we also used Munis finance. That's the data that we enter our information into, and then that data is consolidated with the city's information. and they roll that up into their financials, and that is consolidated into what becomes the whole information that the city puts together to become the financials of the city as for the city of Portland.
Okay, thank you. My other question has to do with so you were talking about the rebuild that had to happen in ADP. I'm curious about to what extent you and the team got the support that you feel you need from ADP in doing that.
Well, it was more or less something that we had to, it was a step by step. And what ended up happening, it was unfortunately something that happened after we realized that we went from the onboarding team to it was after the fact that when we went live, that we realized that it was something that was creating a hindrance on the crosswalk to the general ledger. And so it was something that happened after the fact. So it was while because we were trying to do, it's a multi-tier process of getting the ADP payroll on. You have, trying to get employees paid. You're trying to get your benefits rolled out. It's trying to get your general ledger up and running. It's, there's multiple tiers you have going on at the same time. So the general ledger was one of the facets that was kind of on the background happening and not taking too much of a precedence at the time, because we were trying to make sure the most important pieces that we were focusing on was employees getting paid, benefits happening, MainePers reporting. And so the general ledger was the last piece that we started working on. And so when we started running into the issue of that it was becoming a very cumbersome process, we realized that we needed to take a step back and rebuild it. And not only for the rebuild of the crosswalk, but we also were realizing that there was some of the name changing convention that had to be kind of adjusted for other purposes as well.
Okay, so that was so your team, like district staff, did that and was able to do that using configuration or whatever.
Yes, and ADP also provided us like a step-by-step instruction on how we could do it without taking down the whole system, because it was, the time system as well as like our payroll, because we have two sides of the system. We have the HR functioning side of the system, and then we have the time entry system. And we have to make sure that they're happening in tandem. Mm-hmm. So they gave us step-by-step to make sure neither side of the system crashed in the process. So everything worked out and it happened really smoothly.
Oh, good. Thank you for that explanation. Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
I hate to throw a wrench into things, but and I know we've learned a lot by going and moving to Munis to ADP and trying to reconcile the two groups together and understanding what was actually going wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. What was going wrong with the Munis system before was not Munis, but it was the entry into Munis. Is that a correct statement?
I wouldn't necessarily, it was the entry into Munis, it was how the Munis was built. And so I would say, if the way it was built and the way it was speaking, when you entered information, if you entered it a certain way, it wouldn't spit out the way it needed to. The output wasn't correct in the process because of the way it was built.
Okay, so it was actually faulty to begin with in its initial construction. And my question was, would it have been better to rebuild Munis than to go into ADP in time and energy going on? That's the wrench I wanted to throw into the system. And I'm asking her for opinion, and if you don't want to give the opinion, but it's something I wonder if we shouldn't think about. I'm sorry to bring that up because I know you've worked so very hard for so many months on this, but I just wonder how hard you're going to have to work going forward to just kind of keep things moving. So those are some thoughts and considerations. And if nobody wants to say anything right away, that's okay. But I really, it's just a thought. But if ADP is going to work and it's going to run across and it's going to be easy for the people who have to run it, that's my concern, then, so be it. But I just wonder about the whole process. So I don't know if the question I asked need not be answered because it's an opinion that maybe doesn't want to be shared yet, but I did want to bring it up.
Thank you. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
I have a question that isn't not urgent, but Helene, I guess I'm wondering if you, in this whole process, have come to develop an understanding about why we made some of those initial decisions we made in setting up Munis the way we did, which included not following the recommendations of the Munis experts or the Munis team, as I understand it. So we don't have to answer this either, but I would love to have a conversation with you at some point because I'm just curious to try to at some point connect all these dots. I know that we made decisions that were against the recommendations of the Munis team, and so I don't know if all of the problems resulted from that, but I know that some of them did. So it's just a long-standing curiosity of mine.
Any other comments or questions before we move on and sort of pivot from looking backward to looking forward for our next topic? Okay, seeing none, go ahead, Dr. Scallon.
Yeah, and Chair, just recognize that.
Go ahead.
Chair under the gun there.
Sorry, I couldn't find the right emoji. I was, thank you. I just wanted to, and I know we've done this the last couple of meetings, but just acknowledge the amount of work that has gone into this, and thank you, Helene, for. I think that there are so many chances within this resetting of the systems that you could do the same thing and take shortcuts or do workarounds or, make it easier on yourself in the short term. But I just think, I just really appreciate the attention to detail that you're giving this and the way that you are upholding, just doing it 100% right, so that we do have that really solid foundation to move forward on. And I just understand how much that's taking you and your team. So just appreciation to you.
Yeah.
And then what I was gonna suggest is recognizing the focus on ADP and the current work that Helene and the team are doing to get up, is just suggesting that while we're on the idea of the reports that are being run and the work that's being done, is that we actually stay here for a minute and we talk about the work that's being done around MainePers. And so, Sarah, if you can go to the next slide. Actually, Sarah, can you just pull down your screen altogether and stop sharing?
Didn't work.
No, you need to actually stop the share and stop the presentation.
Yeah, I did. Are you still seeing it?
Just refresh the actual presentation.
While we're working on this, I just want to acknowledge that committee board member Noor has joined us. So welcome.
And so slide 4 should be around ADP and MainePers. Do you see that now?
Hang on, I'm just reopening. Yes, okay. Better?
Sorry. Yep. Helene, if you want to keep going.
Go ahead. Oh, Helene, okay.
Sorry. I just realized I was mute. So the finance team in partnership with ADP and MainePers, they're closing in on the reporting for that Currently, we have not preloaded MainePers. ADP did not have, just to start off, ADP did not have a preloaded MainePers reporting module. So as you know, we're still building that report and it's in its final stages. ADP is struggling with creating the summary line and the payroll date that's required for the ADP reporting that calculates and executes the report. That's about the final piece that we're missing for the ADP reporting. MainePers has been assisting in this process. So every time we have a test file that the programmers provide, the ADP programmers provide, we upload it to ADP through a secured website, and MainePers will add a fake summary line for us into it, and they will test the data that we've been putting they put together, and they will test the spec information and give us updates on what the spec data is missing or needs in relationship to that. We just actually had a meeting today with ADP programmer, because we just did a test late last week, and there was about some fine tuning on some of those specs. So we just fine tuned it today with the ADP programmer. So she's going to try and actually have that test file, another test file ready Thursday, so that we can upload it and see if we can have something ready and regroup on Monday and see if we can have that. Because I explained to them that, again, the MainePers reports are due monthly on the 15th of each month. So every 15th of the month that comes up, we are missing another month of reporting. So this month, in 2 days, we're now 4 months late on reporting. So now we have not reported on anything from January through April for MainePers. We have been, again, paying estimated payments. I go in and I collect the data from payroll, and I do pay based on what we've actually collected from the employee and employer information. So we are making those payments, but we just have not made the reporting information, submitted the information to MainePers. But again, because we need to review the data that that we had put into ADP, just like on the general ledger side, when we first started, a lot of the information when we first went into ADP might have not been true and correct when we first went live with ADP. There will be a little bit of cleanup at the initial start. So as soon as those ADP reports for MainePers are ready, we will have to do a little bit of reviewing before we actually are able to upload. But we anticipate that once we get those reports ready, that will be up and running within 8 to 12 weeks. That we should be all caught up with all of our reporting for the last four months of MainePers reporting.
Is now an okay time for questions about this specific part of the content?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Okay, super. So I am curious about, I'm glad to hear that the payments are happening and it's the reports themselves that are delayed. I'm curious about just generally speaking, I'm not talking dollars and cents in that level of granularity, but I'm curious about what the expected gap or the likely gap will be between the payments we've made and the actuals. So, the estimated payments versus actuals. Do we have a way of sort of assessing how different those numbers might be?
Well, I don't, as far as being an ADP,
Mm-hmm.
I feel pretty confident that we're pretty close on as far as the payments are, only because we paid pretty close attention to the data as we were entering it. If anything, we probably paid in more than when we were supposed to, only because we were flagging information, so there's some differences in rates when it comes to employees that are paid out of a grant. And so we did not have that flag on for those. So we ended up probably most likely flagging more people than we needed to as far as for grants. So we ended up paying in more and having the flag on at the higher rate than we would have normally, if that makes sense.
It does, and I have a follow-up question,
Sure.
and I think, or I hope I know the answer, but to confirm, the money that we're talking about is district responsibility money. I'm confirming that we're not talking about payroll deductions from employee paychecks, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Other questions? Board Chair Lentz, go ahead.
I was just wondering, and this might be for Superintendent Scallon, if we could just review kind of how we've been involving the union and any steps that we've taken just to make sure district employees understand what's happening and the progress and when they can expect things to be completed.
Yeah, I mean, so on that piece, you're going sort of full picture on MainePers. And so Helene, her team, Barry Dunn, MainePers, and Carrie Dowdy, our PEA president, have been meeting on a weekly basis to review our current issues with MainePers and to make sure that we're working both as efficiently as possible, but recognizing that it's more important that we get it right than that we simply get it done. And so we've done a number of communications in partnership with MainePers to keep folks up to date. And starting last week, continuing this week and finishing next week, we are meeting with schools, either before school or after school, to provide face-to-face updates. And myself, PEA president, and MainePers have all been present at all of those sessions so far. This is what Helene is providing an update on right now. As tedious as it sounds, building from the start is actually much easier than what we're talking about, where we are updating and correcting past errors, where it's much more challenging. And so we just submitted this last week to MainePers a file that had updated pension information for July of 22 through, I believe, October of 22 for MainePers to update. And so we did that. That's before the payroll challenges really came about last year. And it was done that way so that we would have a clean starting spot to then work forward through November and December. What everybody around the table, that working group, has discussed is that it's not going to be a quick fix, but that we're committed to working through the summer to continue to get it done. Now that we have the base set, we're starting to work on those challenging months. And so we'll have a better sense over the next couple of weeks of whether November and December is going to be a 3-week process or a 3-month process. So we'll dig through that. One of the things that I will just share with you all that we've shared with employees as we've met with them is that every MainePers member, whether they're a Portland Public Schools member or working from another district, when they go to retire, they start on an estimated retirement plan. And then MainePers works to finalize that plan. And right now, MainePers estimates that it takes between 12 and 18 months to finalize that once they have fully retired. And that doesn't matter if they're in Portland or somewhere else. And so we have been working alongside them. And so even if somebody in our district has been retiring, they've been reaching out and saying, hey, can you look at Ryan's file and check this for us? And we've been doing that. But they've been starting them the same as any other retiree across the state, unestimated. And then they will get trued up so that they are not negatively financially impacted. But we will still be in this work for several more months. The commitment that Helene, myself, I'm sure you share with us is that we're going to get this right. And that we're going to make sure that whether somebody's with us for a year or 20 years, whether they're retiring tomorrow or retiring 20 years from now, that they know that their information is correct when they get to that spot. And so that's our commitment on this.
Thank you. Any other questions on MainePers? Okay, I think we can move on.
All right, so we're going to pivot from FY24 to FY25. I'm going to give a quick update just on the city and where we're at. It's going to be sort of like the sorbet break before we go into the next course. And Helene's back on for that. The city had its first read and public hearing of the budget on May 6th, its second read, and the vote will be on May 20th. The first read, we had competition for attention with the historical designation of the building. And so there wasn't a ton of discussion. There were 5 public comments in favor of the budget. There was one comment that was primarily pushing for more scrutiny of the budget. And so that was the bulk of it. I do anticipate more discussion as it comes up for a vote on the 20th. But at this time, we do anticipate the budget moving forward through the council when they vote on the 20th. And so at that point, it'll move to the voters on June 11th. And so that is where we're at with council. I have inquired if they would like us to do a presentation on the 20th. At this point, it does not seem like there are many questions that are coming up. So I will plan to be present in case there are questions. But recognizing that we've done a couple of presentations at finance with the joint committee, and thank you all for being there for that. It does not appear that there's any big questions at this point. So I'm happy to take questions and then we'll jump into other pieces around FY25 updates.
Yeah, sounds good. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I was wondering if we are planning to do any outreach to our families and community to encourage them to go out and vote.
We were planning on sending out a communication through our standard community newsletter that just provided an update of the budget, where what was in it, and that the council had approved it, and letting them know about when to vote, and that information. If you have other suggestions, certainly more than willing to hear them, especially what's been done in the past. So happy to do that.
I think that's largely what we have done in the past, but just really centered on it and tried to, or, led with it, so that we're trying to catch people's attention, and then maybe did it a few times. Okay. As you know, this election is really tricky because the timing of the election, because not many people even know it's happening. So the more we can do to get it on people's radar screen, the better.
Yeah, makes sense. Thank you for that.
Any other questions? Okay, onward.
So I'm going to pass this to Helene here in a second, but I just want to put one quick framing on it. Is we always talk about the budget being a budget, and that we want to be in a spot where we get in the habit and the cadence of sharing with you an update on any changes that have happened. And so here's the first of those updates, right? So we want to get into this cadence of sharing an update. And in some cases, it'll be something where we will immediately have actions associated with it. And in other cases like this one, it'll be something where we're going to dig in further and be monitoring. And so we want to share that with you tonight. And so with that, I'll pass it off to Helene, who will share updates on this and another grant that we received. And then Sarah will share as a last piece around major construction.
Thank you. So the FY preliminary allocation for the title funding came in 20% lower than what we budgeted for FY 25. So we got some information from the state giving us information regarding our Title I funding, or I should say all of our title funding. So as you can see, I provided you what we actually budgeted in or had budgeted for FY 24, what the board approved in FY 25, and what our preliminary numbers for FY 25 were provided to us from the state. We just received this not too long ago, just maybe I think like a week or two ago. These are what they gave us for each of the grants of the 4 title funds. You can see the difference. The difference is between what the board approved and what was awarded to us. And you could see the difference for between all 4 grants is about $556,000. So next slide, Sarah. So what I provided here on the Title I funds,
Right.
they gave us some explanation as to the reason why. And for Title I funds, they did the census data came in a little bit lower than they expected for our state. So that in essence lowered overall funding for the state. So we in essence received a smaller amount on our Title I funding overall. But also the second piece to that was in the way they did the count in the past, they included the allocations for larger school districts. They included the amounts for charter school students. They would add it. They would attach the students to the larger SAUs, which would be us. And so now they're not adding those charter school students to our count, which in essence would also reduce the amounts that would come to us. So in essence, we had gotten both a decrease because of the census data and the charter school students not being added to our count on the Title I funding. And then on the Title II funding, on the next slide, there was a change in the way the US DOE had explained to the state how they were supposed to be doing their allocation practices. So they had to change the way they allocated their funding for Title II funding. And in essence, that resulted in a change in the process of how they were going to allocate the funding to us. And so that adjusted our funding as well. And that in essence adjusted our funds for Title II. For the other two, for the Title III and IV, the amounts were very small, so they weren't as significant. So there wasn't too much explanation on the reasons why. So I don't have any explanation on those. Those were a little bit on the smaller side. But overall, here is the reasons. Moving forward, I did speak with the Title I director, and so we came up with some plans on how we are planning to kind of focus on how we're going to manage the adjustment. Again, it's a budget, as Ryan mentioned earlier, and so one of the things that we talked about is the state allows us to carry forward a maximum of 15%. So at this time, what the Title I director is going to do is she's going to start reviewing FY 24 and where we are right now and looking at determining if there is any vacancies in this year, if there's how much of the carry forward we will be able to bring forward from this year to next year. Also, we're looking at going to compare if there's any differences, and if there's any differences between what, if you remember, when we did the FY25 budget, we did it based on averages. And so we're going to see if there's, once we, place people into those positions, in those Title I positions, when we start hiring employees and they take their benefits and whatnot, we're going to see if there's any differences between actual and what we budgeted for those positions, and seeing if there's some cost savings there that will alleviate the budget between what we anticipate to be, what the actual budget to be, and what we planned the budget to be. And then we'll continue to monitor. Again, the state said this is preliminary numbers. So we're going to, hopefully see if, like, at the end of the day, as they close out grants, and see if, I don't know if you're familiar with how grants happen across the state. If, other school districts close out the grant, they didn't use the funding, they try to take that funding and then redistribute the fundings to the other school districts who obviously need the funding as well. So maybe there'll be a redistribution of some funding there as well, because again, they use the word preliminary. So there's hopefully a second review of what that funding is going to look like. So there'll be more to come when it comes to that. We'll keep you updated in regards to what if those numbers change, and hopefully it will. But we'll let you know if anything changes on that front.
Thank you for that. I am not seeing any hands raised for questions. Oh, Board Member Opperman, way to prove me wrong. Go ahead. Oh, you're muted though.
Okay, I just waiting to see if there was anything else to be added. Help me understand about who receives Title I services and how the movement in charter schools, or our obligation to provide services to any student, whether it was in a private school, in some areas, or public school, how does that impact? Is that lack of funding from other school districts going to impact us in that we were not able to provide services to students who actually live in our district? And I guess my question is, who comes into our district that doesn't bring their money? Is I guess the simple way of thinking of it. If someone's coming from, let's say, Falmouth and coming into Portland, and they receive Title I funds, but their Title I funds will stay with Falmouth and not come into Portland, is that what's happening when they're talking about the charter school situation? Or is it something completely different that I'm completely confused on?
No, I think that's a little bit different. I think just the charter schools within the area. I can get more information if you like, to get an exact understanding of what the state is implying there. But from my understanding, is what's happening is that they lumped together as one count is the total funding. When they provide it as a total, it included the students in that count, and then it got dispersed.
I think I'll visit with you, and you can help me understand a little bit better, because it's just, it seems that if a student's here, the money should follow them here. So it's my ignorance, and I will admit that. So I'll talk to you another time. Thank you.
Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, and Dr. Appern, just a reminder that many of our elementary schools are designated as Title I schools. So across the board, it's not a per student situation. It's those are title schools across the board where we're providing. We have a system-wide approach.
Any other comments or questions? Okay, I think we can keep going.
On a positive note, PPS was one of 6 schools in the state of Maine who received the Maine Educators Apprentice Grant. We received $250,000 for recruitment, training, and retention. This was a grant that was secured by our director of our BIPOC director, Julia Hazel, and she is received this grant, and this grant is in partnership with the Maine Education and the Department of Labor and Labor Registered Apprentice Program, and it's to pilot a new educator, apprentice, and pre-apprentice program. And the award is to be used to train new and existing educators, and it's supposed to focus on a pathway for the multilingual individuals with disabilities, people of color, and rural communities to increase our representation in our workforce. And the grant is in effect from currently, right now as we speak, through the September of 2026. And so it's a multi-year grant that we have for us.
Just a super quick follow-up question before I go to Board Member Figdor. Is it $250,000 for that entire time span?
Yes. So yeah. So that 250,000 is tiered among it runs across about 3 years.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, just kudos to Julia Hazel, but I raised my hand to say thank you for including this here. I really appreciate the reporting back on major grants. I don't think we need to know of, every single grant when they're small, but a major grant like this, I really appreciate your including it in our monthly meetings. So thank you.
Absolutely.
And just before we go on, because Barrett's here and joining us on this, is Barrett, do you just want to share out how the funds, I realize broadly what the funds are to be used for, but do you have a sense of what the funds will go towards, whether it's people, salaries, training, et cetera?
Happy to speak to this a little bit. So this is just getting going. We haven't even, I don't think we've even received any funds from this yet, as Helene said, because it'll be touching 3 school years. But the goal is that we're going to have, I think our goal is around a total of 42 educators to participate. Our apprentices will be our current ed techs and teachers who already work for Portland Public Schools, who hold a bachelor's and have applied for teacher certifications, but they're working to get those professional teaching credentials. And so it's going to be a mix. Our apprentices is going to be a mix of coursework as well as kind of job-based work where they will hopefully be able to get credit for, what they're doing on the job, sort of like maybe including student teaching requirement towards meeting some of the class requirement, additional class requirements. We're working out how those, with UMaine Farmington, we'll partner to figure out how we can get them on the job learning credit that helps them, advance their credential. So it's really, in essence, it is speeding up and, kind of further advancing the pipeline work we're already doing. But this additional funding really helps us get more people in and advance more people within our system. As we've talked about, some of our most successful recruiting and retention is from within our own universe of people. And so that's so much of the work Julia does for our system, as well as Beth Linovich, is really helping people understand, because it's a really complicated process. Understand, okay, where am I at? Where do I want to go? What do I need to get there? What are the courses? And this can really help them do that. So it's mostly going to be supporting them around those courses. And, some of the work around the cohort, supporting the cohort, and the partnership with universities.
Thank you. That's really helpful. As a follow-up question, I I'm wondering if you could spend a couple more sentences on recruitment activities specifically. I understand that the best recruitment strategy is a good retention strategy. I understand that. And I love the idea of this concept of taking current educators that are in the district and helping them move forward down their career paths. But in terms of recruiting folks that maybe could join us anew, can you spend a couple sentences explaining how this might help advance those efforts as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one more thing that we will be adding into the mix as we get people in. I mean, really, this is focusing on people who we have hired. So it's people who have asserted, who've come to work for us and who have asserted, yes, I want to advance towards professional teacher certification. So, we're sort of looking for that level of commitment as opposed to, someone who is not yet part of our universe.
Yeah.
So that really is the focus with this grant is about, kind of just deepening and accelerating the pathways work that we've been continuing to try and lift.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions or comments? Okay. Onward again.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. So this is relatively short, but kind of a fun update. We are looking forward, hopefully, to the process of submitting applications. It will actually be 4 applications from Portland Public Schools for the state's major construction application process. So our ongoing partners, Harriman, are helping us with this process. They're out at this point helping to update the information from our 2016-2017 facilities assessment. This is focused specifically on Portland High School, Deering High School, Pat's Casco Bay, and Talbot Community School. And the reason being that our high schools are all in need of significant help and renovation. This may also be an opportunity should any one of these schools get picked for the major construction fund. It could potentially open up a conversation between us and the state to design in such a way that we might consolidate some of the high schools. We've got Talbot here in the mix as well, because that is the one school at the elementary level that has not had recent investment, and we know that it needs a lot of work. The mold issues that we had there in August only reinforced that, but the building itself is not in the best of condition. So this process will play out over the next few months due to the state by August 30th at the latest, and we are currently slated for the board to vote on that on August 20th. And just so you have a sense of what goes into this, again, there's a separate application for each of the 4 schools. That's the requirement. We can't lump them all into one application. So each one will repeat these same key components. The basic information at the beginning is very simple. It's things like the address and the name of the superintendent, and then a very brief description of the plan for each of the buildings. The educational program information is really our goals, our mission, vision, a little bit about the current educational programming and why the building as it currently exists in each case doesn't meet the needs of our educational programming. And we're touching on possible consolidation plans in that section without going into any serious detail. Then it requires a fair amount of just detailed information on the facility. So things like where it physically sits, whether it has parking, what the condition of the water and sewer system is, if it's got athletic fields. It goes into the building itself, the characteristics, the size and the type of building. And then it hits on other issues like zoning concerns, security, ADA, that kind of thing. The enrollment and data information is actually mostly just drawn by the state directly from our past 10 years worth of enrollment trends. And then they ask us a few additional questions as well. This is not an incredibly long application. And in fact, I've provided the link to it in the prior slide, so you can look at it yourselves if you want to. And then the facility maintenance and capital improvement plans, that's just something that every district has to have. And so it's giving them our latest version of that. And then the professional facilities and studies assessment is actually not a requirement. It's an optional component of the applications, but we will provide that. We can take the very significant and detailed assessment study that was done back in 2016-17, and we'll be updating that with Harriman's help. There have been some changes to those buildings in those years. They will account for those in the updated assessment that they provide, but that is just sort of an added bonus for the application. So bottom line is this is not laying out a plan or a design. It doesn't have a budget. It is really just essentially trying to show the state why it is that these 4 buildings currently are not meeting our needs and why we would be deserving of this funding as a district to replace these buildings. I'm going to stop there and open it up for questions.
I have a quick question about that very last phrase, replacing the buildings. So if we were to get approved for one or more of these applications, would it be a matter of replacing, for example, Talbot Elementary School, or would it be a matter of repairing the building as it currently exists?
My understanding is that then becomes a conversation with the state through this whole process, and anything that gets approved essentially opens up a site study and a conversation and much deeper analysis about what the right way forward is. So it could open up to a new construction, but it doesn't. I don't think it necessarily means we have to go, move to a whole new site.
Mm-hmm.
And if I can just build on that real quick, the reason we also did it for all 3 of the high school locations is because in the same way, it opens up the conversation around what makes sense in partnership with the state for moving forward and with our community. And so for any of these, what it does is it holds our spot in line. It does not commit us to a path forward. And so I think that's a key piece to this as folks are thinking about this, is just the ability to have a spot in the conversation as opposed to thinking that it would be either a Deering or a Portland or a Casco Bay or a Talbot, but instead that it provides options.
And just to sort of take that analogy one more step, we can get in more than one line, it sounds like. So this wouldn't preclude getting in line, so to speak, for consolidation funds, correct?
Right. So that's
correct.
Yeah, and there's a whole separate application for the consolidation process that's due a year later on June 30th of 2025. So that's an additional process that we can and will go through.
Okay.
And just to be hyper transparent, I think it would be most accurate to say that you could potentially hold multiple spots in the same line. Not that there's different lines, because there's not separate funding right now for consolidated. So it's the same line, but you could show up in different spots in it.
Okay. Thank you. Board Member Figdor, go ahead.
Yeah, and just to underscore that when the state reviews the applications and eventually comes up with a priority list, those are not funded schools. It's a list of the order in which the state would take on the projects if they have the funding. And funding decisions can be made much, much, much later. So, for instance, I believe that of funding decisions, the last cycle was 2017, 2018. And I believe they made a decision in December of last year or early this year to fund a school. So it's a long process, and unfortunately the state has not been allocating a lot of money, but I very much support our moving forward with this.
do we have a sense of, just in terms of the universe of all of the districts and schools that might be applying to this for these funds broadly across the state? Do we have a sense of what other applications the state might be viewing and how we would compare to those potential applications? Basically, what the rest of the line might look like.
What the competition is.
Right.
And Ryan, you may have a different take on this. So, I think that the competition is significant. Based on our initial conversations, both with, we had our legal team do a little bit of early looking for us, and then we had Harriman, kind of talk us through this as well. So obviously the competition is fierce because there are lots of districts that need new buildings or renovated buildings. But the buildings that we have, we think, we will have compelling applications because we know that those 4 buildings are, have serious issues that need to be addressed. So I think we sort of rank in there, but we don't know where. And the consolidated high school thing is, I think, a whole other, more complicated political scenario, just given that we're in Portland. And so I would staying focused on this particular process, the major construction funds. It sounds like, to the extent that there's going to be something, we may have a shot at getting somewhere in this line.
Thank you.
Yeah, Board Member Figdor put a piece in the chat just now around 74 schools on the 2017-2018 list. If I add a little bit to that, and my numbers may not be 100% right, but I think it's pretty close, which I think Portland High School was 15th on that list, plus or minus 1 at the time. And as she points out here, they got up to 8 or 9 on the list. And so I do expect that there's going to be a number of folks that are on this. And so I do think it'll be pretty fierce. And so to the question of how many people, there will be a lot of districts on this list and a lot of schools. Mm-hmm. I think the second piece that I would just add that gets to a broader conversation that this committee and committees next year will really need to think about is, and again, I'm doing this by memory, so we'll just have to check this, but I believe the total amount of funding that the state is able to carry for this is around $300 million of their total revolving bond for this. A project of this scale in Portland would take up the vast majority of that. And so I think there's a need for us to think about how we are advocating to increase the amount of funding that the state has available to do these types of projects. Otherwise, it becomes even harder because if Portland were to receive funding for this, it would become a pinch point. We'd have to wait for most of the other projects to finish before we could start, and we would slow down others. And so I just think we have to be realistic about how we fit into this whole piece, and there will be advocacy that will be needed around the funding stream on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you for that context. Board Member Figdor, I saw your hand and now I don't. Are you good? Okay. Same Board Chair Lentz, I saw your hand and then I didn't. So just checking in to see if you had something.
It's really hard today. I don't know why, but yes, I did have my hand up. I just wanted to mention, I think that we're getting into a really good practice about building out web pages on, topical issues like around the strategic plan, around the budget. I asked Superintendent Scallon to start one on all of this because I do think there's a lot of swirl in the community right now, and just having a landing place for people to go to get all the information is really important. So I think that will be happening in the short term, but then, also like there's just continued commitment on going out to the community to hear people's questions and to listen to their concerns, and just to again reiterate that this is a long process, and so we don't have to be at consensus or anywhere. We don't have to make any decisions right now other than to apply, but just for the public to know that we'll be setting up more listen and learns.
Good reminder. Good context. Other questions, other comments? Looks like we are all questioned out for the moment. Was that the last slide of the deck? Okay.
It was.
So thank you so much to the entire team. I just, I really appreciate all the effort that goes into preparing the information that you share with us, both in terms of the slides themselves and all of the work that goes into, the foundation and all supporting all that content and just all of the complex work that you're doing every day. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course, I appreciate it. Everything the team put into it and also all of your work. So thank you.
Wonderful. And so that was the last agenda topic, correct?
Correct.
Wonderful. Okay, so if there are no other late breaking topics, questions, concerns, comments, okay, super. I would look for a motion to adjourn our committee meeting. Thank you, Board Member Figdor. Could I have a second? Might need to have a Zoom hand because I can't see everybody. Thank you, Board Member Noor. Really appreciate that. Show of hands from committee members for adjournment. Wonderful. Thank you so much. It's unanimous, and we are wrapping up at 5:38 p.m. Thank you so much for all of your engagement in this conversation. Have a good night.